I have been in a relationship with my girlfriend for 3 years now. I shall call her Nikki. It began quite simply when I left a comment on one of her Instagram stories, and from that point, our conversation took off. Eventually, I obtained her number and then added her on Snapchat, and after a week, we finally met in person. We began spending time together right after the holidays in January, and the idea of Valentine's Day was already on the horizon. It was pleasant to have begun conversing with a girl around that time, as it helped alleviate the dread of being alone during that bothersome holiday. As Valentine's Day drew near and Nikki and I had been on a few dates, she opened up to me about a troubling situation involving a stalker she had been facing. Ben is the man's name, and he's a few years older than Nikki. They crossed paths at the same commuter college, where they met in class for a group project. He has also been seen following her around campus on a few occasions. She never contacted the authorities or anything, surprisingly, upon learning that this guy discovered her address and sent her a series of unsettling messages that she chose to disregard. She mentioned that she never blocked the number because she was curious to see how far he would go without picking up on the hints. As I considered her reasons for choosing this moment to share, she explained that it was because he had begun to reach out to her once more, particularly in light of Valentine's Day. As you can observe, he began to increase the texting once more as Valentine's Day drew near. She chose to overlook it, allowing the messages to accumulate. But he escalated the situation by leaving a box of Russell Stover chocolates on her doorstep. She recognized it was from him as he had texted her, "I hope you like the gift I left you." It was at this moment that she resolved to bring things to a close. She crafted a lengthy message in response, one that I shall not disclose out of respect for her privacy. In essence, she conveyed that he requires assistance and informed him that she is now involved with someone else, urging him to respect her space. In today's world, there are various methods to obtain someone's address, yet she felt a chill of fear at the thought that he might have tracked her down by shadowing her home one day. I put forth my utmost effort to ensure that she understood I would not allow him to harm her in any way. Fast forward a few days, and Nikki sent me a concerning screenshot. It was a screenshot of some messages from a phony number, inquiring if the guy she was seeing was me. Me, as in, he mentioned my name. At that moment, I sensed my involvement, which brought about a certain level of discomfort. Up until now, the only information I've gathered about this individual is that he comes across as quite unsettling and excessively persistent in his texting. There's also a possibility that he followed the girl I'm seeing back to her home, and now he's reaching out to her from fake numbers, mentioning my name. Nikki was on the verge of contacting the authorities if this situation didn't come to an end. I informed her that I would accompany her to the police station if he contacted her again. Leap ahead to Valentine's Day. This year, it happened on a Friday. Nikki and I dined at a lovely restaurant overlooking the water. We found ourselves at an outdoor table, enjoying the pleasant weather. While we dined, we both observed a man sat on a bench outside the dining area near the parking lot, his hat pulled low over his face as though he were trying to conceal himself. Nikki cracked a joke. Could that possibly be Ben? We chuckled. He tilted his head slightly in our direction while we were watching him, then quickly averted his gaze. Moments later, he stood up and walked away. We had stopped laughing. Now we truly pondered the likelihood of that genuinely occurring. Initially focused on him, the conversation soon veered off in another direction, allowing us to relish the remainder of our time there. After that, we wanted to continue spending time together. It was Valentine's Day, yet her parents were still at home. I had the place to myself, so we returned together to my rental house. We sat on the couch, and the atmosphere began to shift towards something more intimate. In that moment, Nikki withdrew from me and asked, "What was that?" I heard it as well. Something from outdoors in the backyard. "Do you want to go check?" I inquired. She gave a slight nod. I stepped out onto the backyard patio, anticipating the sound of animals darting away at the notice of my arrival. I glided in my slides, meandering through the yard. I scanned the area for anything that might have toppled over, and I discovered the source of the noise. The whole array of beach chairs that had been propped against the house lay toppled over. I can't quite fathom how that could occur unless there was an encounter with someone or something. That night, not a whisper of wind stirred the air. I surveyed the bushes that surrounded our yard, and then, as if my mind instinctively recognized something amiss, I focused my gaze on a tall figure hidden among the foliage. My neck jutted forward as I earnestly attempted to focus in and gain a clearer view of what lay before me. I advanced a few paces. I experienced a startling moment of realization when I noticed someone lurking in the bushes. He had witnessed. I noticed it by this point. I asked, "Who is that?" The man emerged swiftly from the bushes, moving with such urgency that I perceived it as a potential threat, as though he were poised to charge at me. I seized the opportunity to bring him down while he was still entangled with the bushes and twigs, and I shouted at him to remain down several times. I shouted Nikki's name until she finally stepped outside, and I told her to call the police. The man on the ground fought and attempted to break free several times, but I had him firmly secured in my grip. As Nikki stepped outside, engaged in conversation with the police, I inquired if this was the individual in question. She inhaled sharply and exclaimed, "Oh my God, yes. It was that Ben fellow who had been bothering her." At that moment, I couldn't help but notice that he was sporting the same colored shirt as the guy with the cap from earlier at the restaurant. The authorities arrived at the residence and placed him in handcuffs. He would face charges for trespassing, and seizing the opportunity, Nikki revealed the authorities about the relentless and intrusive messages she'd been getting from him. As he was already in the process of being arrested, Nikki decided to press charges for stalking and harassment. Consequently, the individual ended up paying a fine and receiving a misdemeanor. Nikki received an order of. She has secured measures to ensure her safety, and should he reach out to her once more, he will face arrest again. Ben was the epitome of unsettling behavior. Thank goodness he's at least wise enough not to have reached out to her again. This occurred 4 years prior. Valentine's Day was approaching. My partner and I had envisioned a charming dinner, much like what many couples do. As we approached the restaurant, a couple outside caught my eye, oddly fixated on my boyfriend and me. I nudge my boyfriend's arm as we step inside, and he provides his name to be added to the waiting list. The host informed us that there would be a 45-minute wait, and she mentioned that she would send us a text when our table was ready. My boyfriend suggested we head over to the mini golf place just across the street, so we're making our way back to his car now. The woman from the couple rose and raised her hand, introducing herself as Mrs. Greedy. I found it quite strange and glanced at my boyfriend. The woman continued to extend her hand. I didn't mean to come off as rude. I simply offered her a shake. The woman proceeded to share that she and her husband believe we make a stunning couple. As photographers, they feel we would create beautiful images together and invited us to follow them to their studio. Anticipates that the wait time will be extended. She continues by stating that she doesn't have a car with her, but their location was just a 5-minute drive away, and they could take us there too. Red flags are emerging, and my boyfriend graciously declines, and we should inform her that we have tasks to complete. The expression remained one of the most haunting ever, as she smiled and settled beside her husband. As we settle into the car, I share with my boyfriend just how unsettling that interaction felt, particularly regarding the husband. Uttered not a single word. Upon entering the mini golf venue, we were quite taken aback to discover it was devoid of any patrons. We chuckle about it, but deep down I still feel unsettled. This place isn't particularly large, so the front door is visible from every level. As we embark on as the 5th round begins, the sound of the entrance bell resonates through the air. I glance back, and my heart plummets. It's the same woman with her partner. She appears to scan her surroundings, and then, as our eyes meet, she offers me the most unsettling smile. I inform my boyfriend, and he turned to look as they're gathering their belongings. I express to my boyfriend that I'm feeling uneasy, suggesting we wait in the car since 15 minutes have already gone by, and it shouldn't be much longer now. He nods in agreement, and we pivot, finding them just behind us, their smiles stretching wide across their faces. It's wild how we both ended up here, Mrs. Gretty remarked. This time, the husband suggests that we confront one another, Gretty versus Rod. In that moment, my boyfriend felt a deep sense of despair, as his last name is Rod's. We graciously declined, not wishing to uncover the source of their knowledge, and we expressed that we needed to leave. As we hurried out, their smiles both vanished. I suggested to my boyfriend that we should simply end it. He decided to head back to his place for the night, as it was more convenient than mine, especially since my parents wouldn't return until Sunday morning. He mentioned that we would head out after dinner, refusing to allow some strange couple to spoil the evening for us. We sat in his car for about 15 minutes, discussing how strange the situation was, when he received a text from the restaurant letting us know they were ready for us. We have dinner, and he insists on covering the cost today since it's Valentine's Day, as we typically share the bill. He heads to the bathroom, and as I waited, I could have sworn I caught a glimpse of that lady peeking out from around the corner. I persuaded myself that it was merely a figment of my imagination. My boyfriend is ready to head out. To reach his location, you must follow this winding road flanked by trees. As we begin our journey, we observe a vehicle trailing closely behind us. I inform my husband, and we made our way into a CVS parking lot. We both decided to step out and take a break since I needed to use the restroom before the drive. As we step outside, there's no sign of that car that might have been tailing us, so we proceed to his house. Do you recall the road I mentioned before? The one enveloped by trees? As we drive along, we find ourselves just 3 to 5 minutes into this road. A sudden loud pop echoed, causing my boyfriend to halt the car. Both of his front tires had burst. He connected the dots, dashed to the car, and urged, "Get out, there's not much time left before they arrive." He silenced his engine and turned off the lights, and secured the door. Fear and confusion enveloped me, leaving me in a state of uncertainty about what was unfolding. I suggested we stay in the car for a while. He swiftly caught up with me, and we dashed into the woods. He instructed me to be quiet. We were concealed behind a cluster of trees and bushes. As we concealed ourselves, he contacted the authorities and swiftly detailed our location and the unfolding situation. The operator requested to remain on the line, assuring that the police would arrive in just a few minutes. He mentioned that he couldn't remain on the line and then disconnected the call. While we remained reclined, the sound of a car engine approached us. My partner suggested we both lie flat, and I followed his lead. We heard the car come to a halt, and then the unmistakable voice of Mrs. Gretty reached our ears, if that was indeed her true name. She shouted, "Damn it, we took too long." A car door slammed shut, followed by the rapid departure of a vehicle, its tires screeching as it sped off into the distance. We remained there until the police arrived, which was roughly 2 minutes later. We clarified the situation and were informed that we would be reached out to if anything arose. I reached out to my sister to come and pick us up while he arranged for a tow truck for his car. 4 years later, nothing has surfaced regarding it, and we remain in the dark about their intentions or identities. We are now united in marriage, with an incredible tale to share with our children. In the fall of 2018, I was enrolled in online classes at a well-regarded college, but I was aware that I would be transferring to my hometown's 4-year university for the winter semester. I still desired to forge new connections, hoping to alleviate the sense of solitude, and perhaps, in the process, I might encounter someone special to date, which indeed came to pass. I encountered this girl via Tinder. She was truly amazing, and we shared so many interests. To sum it up, we began dating and enjoyed a great deal of fun together. She wasn't from my hometown, and I observed that after returning from Thanksgiving break, her behavior and attitude had shifted. She had a tendency towards sarcasm, but lately it felt more like cruelty. For instance, the playful, flirtatious teasing had taken on a much more intense edge. It's important to note that there was no physical harm. I must emphasize that. It was precisely the sort of playful banter that has no place in a relationship. I simply dismissed it as stress from the impending finals. She ultimately returned home for the winter break. We consistently discovered methods to connect daily, whether through texts, snaps, or the occasional FaceTime, typically once or twice a week. As the winter semester commenced, I transitioned into an apartment, as the dorms appeared rather uninviting, and I had discovered a charming place that was unexpectedly affordable. On the very night of the first day of classes, we made the decision to part ways. As I mentioned, she hailed from another state, and she struggled significantly with being away from home due to her deep longing for her family, friends, and pets. Aside from me and her roommate, with whom she had a strained relationship, she hardly knew anyone else in town. She was simply an incredibly reserved individual. That's not necessarily a negative aspect. However, as I mentioned, she lacked a close circle of friends, which led her to prefer solitude most of the time. It was a pleasant way to step away without being the one to initiate it, as that kind of situation tends to overwhelm me with stress and anxiety. As the weeks passed, I found myself feeling a bit less sorrowful. Reflecting on the relationship revealed numerous issues I had previously ignored. As Valentine's Day approached, a sense of melancholy washed over me. I had some delightful surprises in store for my girlfriend, and the anticipation was bittersweet. I thought that perhaps for that week, I would bring my Tinder account back to life, mainly to see if I could score a match and maybe spend some time with someone during the holidays, so I wouldn't feel so lonely since most of my friends were busy with their own partners. I spent around 2 days before the holiday, and after a few hours of using the app, I received some matches. I engaged in conversation with many of them, inquiring about their plans for Valentine's Day. As expected, they were all heading out to bars. To be honest, that way of living doesn't quite resonate with me. It really doesn't appear enjoyable to me. However, I tend to rely on it only as a final option, and I wasn't feeling that urgent. However, I eventually began messaging a girl named Alex, who also wasn't into that sort of thing. She prefers to stay in and watch movies, which is exactly what I would like to be doing as well. She even shared the same major as one of my closest friends and was enrolled in some of the classes he was attending. However, she was uncertain whether their classes coincided, as they had only just begun. I was attempting to learn everyone's names. Alex can be vividly depicted with her shoulder-length blonde hair, charming glasses, a sprinkle of freckles, and striking blue eyes. After chatting for about an hour, I received her Snapchat, and we transitioned the conversation there. I inquired whether she would be interested in spending time together on Valentine's Day, and she agreed. It was Valentine's Day in 2018, a Thursday that week. Fortunately, I had no classes on Friday, and Alex mentioned she would forego her Friday morning class, so we wouldn't feel rushed to conclude the night too soon. The initial portion of the evening unfolded quite seamlessly. We arrived at McDonald's, enjoyed a film, and then strolled through the downtown area for a bit. To keep it brief, we ultimately returned to my apartment and became intimate. Honestly, everything went wonderfully. She inquired whether she could stay the night due to the snowfall outside, as her home was roughly a 10-minute walk away. Naturally, I informed her that she was free to do so. We finally drifted off around 1 a.m. I tend to wake easily, particularly when there's another person sharing the bed with me. Around 3 a.m., Alex stirred me from my slumber as she rose from the bed, yet I chose not to let her know that she had roused me. The room was shrouded in darkness, yet I could make out her figure as she moved toward the bathroom. She flicked the switch, illuminating the room, and closed the door to prevent any light from spilling into the bedroom. I felt utterly exhausted, so I simply drifted back into slumber. I found myself awake once more at 5:30 a.m., and to my astonishment, Alex was absent from the bed beside me. I glanced over to check if she was still in the bathroom, but the absence of light indicated that it was turned off. I wasn't overly shocked. Rather, I found myself intrigued about her whereabouts. With a determined motion, I propped myself up and reached for my phone resting on the bedside table. I had no messages from her indicating that she had departed, yet the clothes she wore earlier remained on the ground beside mine, suggesting she was still nearby. I then heard a creak come from the other side of the bedroom. Alex stood in the corner, his back turned to me. A sense of unease washed over me. I softly called her name and inquired if she was all right, yet there was no reply. I switched on the lamp resting on the bedside table. It didn't produce an abundance of light, yet there was sufficient illumination. I rose from my slumber and made my way to her side. She stood there, completely still, as if frozen in time. I felt a chill run down my spine. Yet my curiosity compelled me to uncover the mystery unfolding before me. I softly rested my hand on her shoulder and repeated her name, and there was silence. 10 seconds of silence hung in the air, and just as I was about to call her name once more, she spun around with an unnatural swiftness, unleashing a torrent of screams and striking me with wild abandon. It wasn't the most intense impact, but being a bit on the slender side, I felt it sting a little. The most chilling aspect was the complete lack of emotion on her face. I retreated and collapsed onto my bed, and she pursued me, continuing to scream and strike me. After approximately 30 seconds of this occurring, she dashed over to her clothes, snatched them up, and took off. Out of my apartment, I leaped out of bed and dashed my front door, which stood wide open, and she had vanished. I closed it and secured it with a lock. I soon became aware of a dreadful odor wafting from the bathroom. The door was closed, and as I swung it open, a dreadful odor wafted out. I switched on the light and discovered the room in disarray. The shower curtain had been torn away. The medicine bag lay discarded on the ground, and the floor was damp beneath it. The most challenging aspect was that she left her mark on the mirror in a rather unconventional manner. I promptly contacted the police, and they dispatched an officer to my location. They inquired whether they might. I checked her Tinder and Snapchat profile, but naturally, both had been removed. I had just one picture of her that she sent on Snapchat, and I screenshotted it because it was adorable. She appeared in the picture, but it was enhanced with a Snapchat filter. Unfortunately, there wasn't much law enforcement could do other than take a report and remain vigilant. Her in the area. They suggested that I invite a friend to stay over later that night, just in case she needed support. I attempted to gain entry, which is precisely what I accomplished. I reached out to one of my closest friends, Rob. He shared the same major as Alex. He arrived later that night, and I shared with him the entire narrative. One of the classes she mentioned that my friend was also enrolled in was a rather small class that only met twice a week. I presented Rob with the picture I had, and when I inquired if he recognized her, he replied that he had never encountered her in class. Rob and I enjoyed a movie and drifted off to sleep around midnight. I woke up around 3 a.m. to discover someone attempting to open the front door from the other side. After allowing it to unfold for roughly a minute, it subsequently came to a halt. I approached and peered through the peephole, yet no one was present. Nothing has occurred since then, yet it continues to genuinely unsettle me.